what the government knows about the pineal and doesn't want you to find out. We begin with that line because it is meant to snap your attention, not as an accusation set in stone, but as a question pressed against the darkness. Could there be something about the small gland at the center of the skull that, if properly understood, weakens the hold of certain intermediaries who profit from our dependence? Today, we are going to move from question to experience. I want to show you an ancient thread of practice that, according to certain Gnostic texts, invited people to confirm a private, embodied signature of original memory, and to do it with nothing more than their own hands. This is not a medical lecture, and it is not an invitation to extreme practices. It is an offer, a gentle, non-invasive way to check whether a felt resonance exists inside you, and an exploration of why institutions, religious or political, might have had reasons, historically, to keep such methods from spreading. Centuries ago, manuscripts discovered near Nag Hammadi in 1945 brought to light a cluster of writings that did not make it into the mainstream canons. These texts, including what scholars attribute to the Gospel of Philip, describe conditions of remembrance, seals, and bodily signs that marked those who had touched an inner source. Let us be clear. These are allegorical and theological claims within a particular esoteric tradition. When I say, according to certain Gnostic texts, I mean exactly that. An interpretive tradition preserved in manuscripts, not an uncontested historical fact for every faith. Still, the pattern is clear across many sources. Where there is a method that lets an individual directly verify their own spiritual state, the role of intermediaries weakens. That dynamic, the loss of centralized authority over spiritual validation, helps explain why such teachings were often sidelined, reinterpreted, or disappeared from public view. Fast forward to modernity. The pineal gland has become a kind of shorthand in esoteric circles for inner vision, a physiological symbol adopted by those who speak of seeing beyond ordinary perception. Scholars and seekers have long mapped symbolic cranial centers to older metaphors of insight. At the same time, modern governments and intelligence services have a documented history of interest in the mind. Declassified programs such as MKUltra revealed in the 20th century that state actors once invested in experimental research at the edges of cognition and behavior. Citing MKUltra is not the same as proving a current secret suppression of spiritual knowledge about the pineal. What it does provide is precedent. Powerful institutions have, in the past, pursued ways to understand and sometimes manipulate mental processes. That historical fact gives context to the question the title asks. Why would any authority be attentive to a technique that enabled people to verify spiritual autonomy with their own hands? The heart of what we will do now is simple and somatic. Within the Gnostic descriptions, there are 3 loci, 3 marks described as signs placed on or near the body, that function as a kind of signature or seal of remembrance. I will describe these 3 points and then guide you through a cautious, gentle self-check. Remember the rules. This is an experiential practice, not a diagnosis. We are not claiming that any sensation you feel is a medical condition, nor that it will have measurable changes on your brain or health. We are simply inviting attention. The first mark is described in the old texts as located at the back of the head, the place where the skull meets the neck. Esoterically, it is called a seal of origin. In modern interpretation, it is sometimes correlated with the cranial axis around the pineal region. Again, this is interpretive language. When I say correlated, I mean that some traditions read the ancient description as pointing to a center of inner sight or remembrance. This is metaphorical, not an anatomical claim. The second mark appears along the lateral line of the hand, near the edge where the little finger meets the wrist, a place that figuratively speaks of reach and perception, the way we extend toward the world. The third mark sits at the center of the chest, just above the sternum, a place many traditions associate with the voice or counsel of the inner source. Think of these 3 not as magical buttons but as focal points for attention: a back-of-head resonance, a lateral hand sensation, and a chest-centered stillness. Now I will guide you through a gentle, non-invasive self-check. If at any moment you feel pain, dizziness, or strong discomfort, stop immediately. If you have medical concerns or a history of neck or chest problems, please consult a professional before trying any body-centered practice. Otherwise, find a comfortable seat or lie down. Close your eyes if that helps, and let your breathing be steady and easy, not forced, just natural. Begin with the base of the skull. Place the pads of your thumb and forefinger lightly where the skull meets the top of the neck. Do not press hard. A gentle contact is enough. Notice texture, temperature, subtle shifts beneath the skin. Do you feel a tiny indentation, a change in tension, a subtle warmth, or nothing at all? Hold this light attention for no more than 20 seconds if comfortable, no less than 10 if that feels right. Allow whatever arises, subtle sensation, a blankness, a memory, a fleeting image, to be exactly as it is. Do not judge it. The texts we just mentioned speak of a seal. You might sense an impression, or you might sense nothing. Either response is normal. Next, turn your attention to the outer edge of your non-dominant hand, the strip of skin between the little finger and the wrist. Some traditions describe this area as an interface with perception. Again, place your fingers there gently. Explore across the skin with light contact. You are not probing for pain or forcing a reaction. You are offering your attention as a kind of mirror. Notice any tingling, warmth, coolness, or a sense of belonging. Hold attention here for roughly the same short span, 15 to 20 seconds, and then release. Finally, rest your fingertips softly on the upper center of your chest, just above the sternum. This is not over the heart, but at the hollow above it. Place no pressure. Simply allow your fingertips to rest and listen. Some people report a spreading calm, a subtle vibration, a quiet sinking. Others notice breath patterns, emotions, or nothing at all. All of these are legitimate. If at any moment you feel lightheaded or uneasy, lift your hand and resume normal breathing. Keep your breathing natural and open throughout this process. When the 3 points have each been attended to briefly, allow a moment of silence. Pay attention to how your internal dialogue reacts. It's common for the mind to generate objections immediately. This is imagination. You're being suggestible. It's placebo. It's nonsense. Gnostic sources name figures like archontes or the demiurge as metaphors for the forces that cloud remembrance, externalized ways of describing internal mechanisms of doubt and reflexive disbelief. We will treat those metaphors as helpful vocabulary, not literal beings. The pattern is the same, whatever language you use. Internal defenses often rise to protect identity and narrative stability. When skeptical thoughts arrive, do not try to silence them aggressively. Notice them as you would notice clouds passing. Name them if that helps. Skepticism, fear, dismissal, and then return your attention to the sensation in the body, as if you are letting your focus be a lighthouse beam that keeps shifting back to the points you checked. The purpose here is not to argue with every thought, but to practice noticing thought without turning it into action. The moment you argue, you've stepped back into the arena those defenses want you in. If, during your check, you experienced even the faintest resonance, a subtle warmth, a sense of being recognized, a memory that felt like an echo rather than something you deliberately recalled, you may choose to speak a short activation phrase aloud. This phrase is intentionally compact and poetic. It is not a command to force a change, nor a promise of revelation. It is a gentle articulation meant to help translate interior sensation into language. If you feel resonance, and if speaking aloud is comfortable for you in your environment, try this 9-word sentence once. I remember the light that predates shape and name. Speak it clearly, without strain, and listen for how it lands in your body. If it feels supportive, you may repeat it up to 3 times in a calm voice, spacing each repetition with a quiet breath. If it does not feel right, do not force it. The phrase is a tool, not a test. It is important to acknowledge the power dynamics at play in why this kind of method is threatening to some forms of authority. practices that give individuals direct access to verification, a way to say, "I recognize this within myself," shorten the chain between the person and what they call sacred knowledge. Historically, institutions that mediated spiritual authority often had social and political roles built around that mediation. If a practice allows people to bypass those channels reliably, the institution's capacity to influence, interpret, and control diminishes. That dynamic is the crux of the title's suggestion. Why would governments or religious gatekeepers be attentive to, or even fearful of, methods that democratize spiritual verification? It is not a claim that a global conspiracy exists today. It is a framework for understanding motives. There is another side to this. Whenever a method like this circulates, it also becomes commodified, parodied, or absorbed into sensational narratives that strip it of depth. That is why critical thinking matters. We balance openness to inner experience with careful scrutiny of institutional claims and of our own desire for immediate certainty. The Gnostic idea of anamnesis, recollection, is not an escape from reason. It is an invitation to integrate felt knowledge with discernment. If you feel something, we encourage you to hold it with questions. Where does it point? Does it change how you act in the world? Is it accompanied by compassion? Does it reduce fear? These are practical measures that resist both gullibility and dismissiveness. You might be wondering about evidence beyond subjective report. There are verifiable historical touchpoints that can be responsibly cited. The find at Nag Hammadi in 1945 placed a cache of previously little-known writings in the hands of scholars, and the content of those manuscripts has altered how some historians view early spiritual diversity. Separately, the declassification of programs like MKUltra in the late 20th century shows that some government agencies once invested resources into exploring mind-related technologies and techniques. These are not proof that a modern state today is hiding pineal secrets. They are, however, historical facts that make the question plausible, and they help explain why a title like ours can resonate. We should also consider predictable responses from people who sit in authority: reinterpretation, dismissal, or co-optation. A practice that receives attention often gets reframed into forms that align with prevailing structures, turned into doctrine, commercial products, or simple techniques divorced from their ethical grounding. That is why the mode we offer matters: experiential, private, and modest in claim. This is not about overthrowing institutions by force. It is about reclaiming a small capacity for self-verification that, if widely practiced, would change the balance of spiritual authority in subtle ways. If you experienced something and the phrase felt like it had weight, you are not required to tell anyone. Experience can be quiet. But if you did feel a resonance and want to signal to others without unpacking your experience, type the single word recognition in the comments. One word only. This is our small, low-risk way of finding each other without turning a private, vulnerable moment into spectacle. If you choose to do this, know that our community values discretion and support, not sensationalizing or judgment. There will be inner voices that rush to explain the experience away. Memory, suggestion, coincidence. That is normal and expected. The more important skill is what you do with that voice. Watch it. Thank it for protecting you in the past. Then return attention gently to your body. Over time, if you practice noticing without arguing, your capacity to distinguish between reflexive doubt and a stable, reliable inner impression will often sharpen. It is not a quick guarantee of certainty. It is a gradual refinement of attention. For those who are curious about historical texts and public records, we will be following up with episodes that examine the primary sources and the documentary evidence in a careful way. Those follow-ups will treat the Nag Hammadi discovery and declassified governmental programs with the qualifiers they deserve. According to, alleged, recorded in the documents, and interpreted by scholars. We will avoid sensational leaps and stick to verifiable materials when making claims about institutional activity. For now, This channel's immediate task is to return the capacity of recognition to the individual, to give you a safe method to see what you can see in yourself. Before we close, a few practical notes. This practice is optional. It should never replace professional medical or psychological care. If you have concerns about your neck, chest, or mental health, consult a qualified professional. Do not attempt forceful manipulation of any part of your head or body. The guided checks are designed to be non-invasive, brief, and safe. If you experience strong emotions afterward, consider grounding practices. Drink water, walk gently, speak with someone you trust, or seek support if needed. Finally, know that the discovery we are describing is not a conspiratorial secret held in a vault, nor is it a magical key that instantly unlocks a new reality for everyone. It is a low-tech invitation to remember. Whether or not institutions ever feared it, the act of checking your own body with attention returns authority over knowledge to the person living it. It is small, intimate, and radical in its humility. If what you heard here connects with you, and you want to continue this investigation of documents, testimony, and the public record, treated carefully and with scholarly restraint, subscribe to the channel for the next episode. There we will sift through historical sources, the Nag Hammadi manuscripts, and publicly available records that illuminate why this conversation matters. Until then, hold whatever you found quietly, treat it with both curiosity and caution, and remember that genuine awakening is not about proving something to others. It is about learning to live with a subtler, steadier intimacy with what is true for you. We close with reassurance. Whether you felt a spark in the base of your skull, a whisper along your hand, a hush at your sternum, or nothing at all, your experience is valid. The point is not to create a new orthodoxy, but to restore a modest ability to recognize. If you felt anything during the self-check, type recognition in the comments. One word only. If you want the next episode where we carefully examine texts and records that provide historical context for this work, subscribe now. We will meet again with documents and deliberation, not fear and not dogma, but with the steady intention to know.